don't block out the rabbi, block out Esther, Haman. There you go. All right. So, the story of Esther is both unusual and unique in the Bible in every respect. The events related in it occurred during the period of exile. For the Jews, where are the Jews? They're in Shushan, right? In Persia. And nearly the entire story takes place inside the palace of a corrupt and hedonistic Persian king called Ahasuerus. Or you like to call him Xerxes. I'm reading, it's okay. And the story is about a young heroine, a Jewish girl, as suggested by her Persian name, had begun to assimilate into the ruling culture around her. Following her marriage to the Persian king, she is forgotten by her Jewish brethren in Shushan. Esther was alone, lost in the palace of Ahasuerus, without any contact, even with her uncle Mordecai. Esther's story takes place in the backdrop of another historic drama. At the same time, following the declaration of Koresh, the first Jews returning to the land of Israel from exile tried desperately to reclaim and rebuild the land. Yet in the scroll of Esther, this is not even mentioned at all. Instead, the scroll concentrates on the people in the city of Shushan who were exiled from Jerusalem and who had begun to assimilate into the local Persian population. It's always a bad thing. In particular, the focus is on a young girl, an orphan girl, who lost her entire family except for her uncle Mordecai. And she had been exiled from the land of Benjamin, my people, and the land of Israel. The young girl, though, is torn away from her uncle and taken to the king's harem along with many other attractive women. At this point, it seems that the possibility of her maintaining any connection with her family and the Jewish people was non-existent. But despite the complete loss of contact with the Jews in Shushan or with her uncle Mordecai, something in Esther kept her Jewish roots alive. When Haman, one of the king's advisors, planned to exterminate all the Jews in Persia, Mordecai at great risk went to speak with Esther at the palace. He reminds Esther of who she really is and tells her of the crucial role that she must play in the world at such a time as this. Esther agrees and listens to the call of her inner voice, the voice of belonging. When Esther understands the very future of the men, women, and children, the Jewish people, they all depend on her, she realizes she must risk her own life to save theirs, and she must embark on a particularly devious and risky course along the edge of the abyss, the machinery of death and destruction that Haman wanted to build. So the scroll challenges us to recognize the forces of evil before they achieve their goal. And it teaches us the importance of fighting evil before it builds up force. Each generation witnesses its own Haman, whose aim is to destroy the faith of the people of God. And Esther's story reminds us of the war against evil and the fact that we have many partners in this battle, our main partner being God. The story also reminds us that even people who seem distant, lost to us, cut off, and residing in darkness in corrupt palaces will join in our battle if only we remind them what is at stake and that they have a responsibility to stand on the right side of history and, of course, the call of God. And the book of Esther was written in honor of Esther's heroic victory. Okay? Amen. So, does anybody want to read? If you want to read, I want you to come up and read, okay? I don't want to read the whole thing by myself. Oh! Chapter 1. It was in the days of Ahasuerus. This was Ahasuerus who reigned from India to Ethiopia. 127 provinces. In those days when King Ahasuerus had established himself on his imperial throne in the capital city of Shushan, in the 3rd year of his reign, he tended a feast for all his ministers and servants. The forces of Persia and Media, the nobles and the colonial ministers in his presence, where he exhibited the affluence and eminence of his kingdom, the glory of splendor of his magnificence for many days, 180 days. At the completion of these days, the king tendered for all the people present in the capital city of Shushan, from the greatest to the least significant, a feast for 7 days, on the grounds of the garden in the royal palace. There were pure white drapes, fine woolen cushions, bluish emerald wool, brocaded with strands of linen and mauve, purple woolen threads over silver columns and marble pillars, gold and and silver couches on the floor inlaid with rare gems and marble, set in the parallel pattern, circular pattern. As for drinking, golden utensils, other sundry vessels, and plenty of royal wine with magic lagresse. The drinking was proper with no coercion, for the king had also instructed all his palace officials to satisfy each individual's desire.
Let's see where you were at.
Start with Queen Vashti.
Queen Vashti, as well, tendered a feast for women at King Ahasuerus' palace. On the seventh day, when the king was exhilarated by drink, he instructed Mehuman, Bezetta, Charvona, Bigta,
I knew when to stop.
Zethar, and Carcass, the 7 servants who attended King Ahasuerus' person, to present Queen Vashti before the king, clad in the royal crown, to flaunt her beauty before the nations and the ministers, for she was of beautiful appearance. Queen Vashti refused to attend as ordered by the king through the servants, and the king was extremely angered. His fury consumed him. The king consulted the sages who were well versed in the affairs of the times, for the king would thus place matters before all who were versed in the procedural and legal concerns. Most intimately associated with him were Karshina, Shetar, Admata, Tarshish, Meres, Marsena, and Memucan, the 7 ministers of Persia and Media, who were in personal contact with the king, and who occupied the highest seats of power in the kingdom. Concerning the proper procedure to follow with Queen Vashti, since she did not do as directed by King Ahasuerus through the servants, Memucan spoke before the king and the ministers. It is not only his majesty that Vashti has aggrieved, but all the ministers and all of the peoples in all the King Ahasuerus' colonies. For the affair of the queen will extend to all women, so that they will disparage their husbands, saying, King Ahasuerus commanded that Queen Vashti be brought to him, but she never came. This very day the noblewomen in Persia and Media will say, those who have heard about the affair of the queen shall report it to the king's ministers, causing enormous disparagement and rage. If his majesty deems it proper, let him issue a royal edict to be recorded in the bylaws of Persia and Media, never to be revoked, that Vashti must never again appear before King Ahasuerus, and let his majesty bestow her regency on a companion of hers who is superior to her. Now when the news of his majesty's writ and its implementation reverberates throughout the kingdom, vast as it is, then all the wives will honor their husbands from the greatest to the least significant. The advice was viewed favorably by the king and his ministers, and the king acted on Memucan's recommendation.
Finish that last piece there.
He dispatched scrolls to all the king's colonies, to each and every colony in his own script, in each and every people in their own language, instructing that every husband be dominant in his home, and that his people's language be the one spoken.
Okay, now it's going to get good now. You're going to start hearing names. Now, when Bo starts reading, you know what to do if they mention Haman. When they mention Queen Esther, you go, ah. When they mention Mordecai, yay! I just want to make sure you had the rules. All right, good.
Y'all don't laugh at me if I mispronounce words or names. Okay. After these events, as King Ahasuerus' After these events, as King Ahasuerus' ear dissipated, He remembered Vashti and how she had acted and the decree against her. The king's youthful valet suggested, "Let them seek for his majesty young maidens of beautiful appearance, and let his majesty appoint officials in all the colonies of his kingdom, who shall assemble all the young maidens of beautiful appearance at the capital city of Sheshwan, in the harem residence, in the custody of his majesty's eunuch. Hedge the harem overseer, and let them be supplied with their cosmetics. And the young women whom his majesty views with approval shall reign in place of Vashti." This suggestion was viewed favorably by the king, and he implemented it. There was a Jewish man in the capital city of Sheshwan. His name, Mordecai, son of Yair, son of Shimi, son of Kish, a Benjamite man, who was exiled from Jerusalem, with the captives exiled with Jeconiah, king of Judah, driven into exile by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, who was the foster parent of Hadassah. This was his cousin Esther, as she had neither father nor mother.
Just in your face, I want people to see you.
The young woman was beautiful in form and appearance, and when her father and mother died, Mordecai adopted her as a daughter. Now it happened when the king's edict, his bylaw, was made public, and a large number of young women were gathered at the capital city of Szechuan in custody of
They're in China.
Shushan.
They're not in China.
Thinking of the song,
Shushan.
of Shushan. In the custody of, and nobody corrected me. Y'all just like, say Szechuan.
Everybody wanted Chinese food. They thought it was Christmas.
Oh my God. Of Shushan in the custody of Haggai. That Esther was brought to the royal palace in custody of Haggai, the harem overseer. He viewed the young woman favorably, and she gained his benevolence. He eagerly delivered her cosmetics and her clothing allowance to her, and also the 7 special maidservants assigned to her. Assigned to her from the royal household staff. He favored her maidservants with preferential treatment at the harem residence. Esther did not reveal the identity of her people or her heritage, since Mordecai had instructed her.
A little slow.
Each and every day, Mordecai was in the courtyard of the harem residence to apprise himself of Esther's welfare, and of what would be done with her. When the time arrived for each of the young women to be admitted to King Ahasuerus, at the end of her participation in the course for women which lasted 12 months, for they were anointed during the cosmetic treatment with the following: 6 months with balm of myrrh, and 6 months with aromatic ointments and other womanly cosmetics. This is how the young woman would be admitted to the king. Whatever she requested would be provided to accompany her from the harem residence to the royal palace. She would arrive in the evening and return in the morning to a second harem residence in the custody of Shamsa? How do you say it? Shamgaza? I thought I know this.
Was one of the Marx brothers was Shem? Sha'agaz.
Okay. Choking. Sha'agaz. The king of the eunuchs, overseer of the concubines. She would no longer be admitted to the king unless the king desired her, when she would be summoned by name. When the time arrived for Esther, the daughter of Abicail, the uncle of Mordecai, adopted as a daughter to be admitted to the king, she requested nothing save what she suggested to Haggai, the king's eunuch, the harem overseer. Esther was regarded with favor by everyone who beheld her. Esther was brought to the king Ahasuerus onto his royal palace in the 10th month, that is, the month of Tevet. During the 7th year of his reign, the king loved Esther more than all of the women. She gained his favor and his benevolence more than all the maidens. So he placed a royal crown upon her head and coronated her in place of Vashti. The king tendered a magnificent feast for all the ministers and servants, the feast of Esther.
Aww. Can you hear the music? Ba-da-da-da-da. Ba-da-da-da-da. Where's the motorcycle music? Ba-da-da-da-da. You know that old commercial? Ba-da-da-da. Our next reader will be Stephen.
He waived the colonial taxes and lavished gifts with majestic largesse. When the maidens were gathered a second time, Mordecai gave gateway to the king. Esther would not reveal the identity of her heritage or her people, just as Mordecai directed her. Esther followed Mordecai's, just as she did when she was reared by him. In those days, when Mordecai sat gateway to the king, Bigtan and Teresh became enraged. They were the two of the king's stewards, of the guardians of the entrance, and sought to assault King Ahasuerus. The matter was apprehended by Mordecai, Queen Esther. Esther related it to the king in Mordecai's name. The matter was investigated and verified, and both were hung from the gallows. This was inscribed in the book of archives in the presence of the king.
All right. All right. Jackie and Evelyn are coming up to read. Jackie will do the reading, Evelyn will do the crying.
After these events, King Ahasuerus conferred eminence on Haman, and exalted him, placing his seat of office above all of his fellow ministers. And all the king's servants who were at the gateway to the king kneeled and prostrated themselves before Haman. The king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai, would neither kneel nor prostrate himself. Said the king's servants who were at the gateway of the king to Mordecai, why are you flouting the king's command? It happened that when they spoke to him daily and he paid them no heed, they informed Haman Mordecai's avowal would be sustained, for he told them that he was a Jew. Haman nor prostrated himself before him, and Haman totally incensed. But it was demeaning in his view to strike at Mordecai, for he was informed of the identity of Mordecai's people. Haman sought to destroy all the Jews throughout Ahasuerus' realm, Mordecai's people.
Keep going.
In the first month, which is the month of Nisan, King Ahasuerus' 12th year, a pur, meaning lot, was cast in the presence of Haman. Specific day, and specifically the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Haman said to King Ahasuerus, there exists a particular people, far-flung, widespread, among the peoples in all the colonies of your realm. Their customs differ from those of all peoples, and they do not abide by His Majesty's bylaws.
She's like, say the name, say the name.
His Majesty has nothing to gain by tolerating them. If His Majesty deems it proper, let it be inscribed that they are to be exterminated. And I shall weigh out 10,000 silver talents under the auspices of the executive staff to be deposited in the royal coffers. The king removed his ring from his hand and presented it to the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, oppressor of the Jews. And the king scribes were then summoned during the first month on the 13th day of the month, and transcripts were made of all of Haman's envoys to the governors of each of the colonies and to the ministers of each people, each and every colony in its own script, each and every people in its own language. It was written in King Ahasuerus' name and sealed with the royal ring, so that the scrolls would be dispatched, carried by couriers to all the king's colonies to devastate, slaughter, and annihilate all the Jews, young and old, children, women, in a single day, on the 13th day, the day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, with their booty to be despoiled. The terms of the writ became legally binding in each and every colony, displayed conspicuously before all the peoples, so that they would be poised on that day. The couriers were dispatched by urgent royal command, and the decree was delivered in the capital city of Shushan. The king and Haman then sat down for drinks, while the city of Shushan was in confusion.
Yay! Good job, Evelyn. Good job. Our next reader is from Nigeria and speaks Spanish. She's going to read in English for you, though.
Mordecai was appraised for everything that had transpired. Mordecai rent his garments and garbed himself in a sackcloth and ashes. He proceeded into the city and sounded a great bitter wail. He came to the front of the king's gate, for one could not enter the gateway to the king clad in sackcloth. And each and every colony, everywhere the king's directives and bylaws reached, there was immense grief among the Jews, fasting, weeping, and lamenting. Sackcloth and ashes cloaked multitudes. Esther's maidservants and stewards came and told her about it, and the queen was extremely shaken. She dispatched garments to clothe Mordecai and remove his sackcloth, but he refused them. She then called for Hatak, one of the king's officials, whom he had placed at her disposal, and instructed him concerning Mordecai to ascertain what was happening and why. Hatak withdrew and went to Mordecai to the city through fair, which was at the front of the gate to the king. Mordecai informed him of all that he had experienced and of the silver which Haman had explicitly promised to weigh into the royal coffers so that the Jews would be annihilated. A copy of the text of the legally binding writ, which had been delivered in Shushan, mandating that they be destroyed. He gave to him to show Esther and to inform her, and to order her to gain entrance to the king, to plead with him, and to beg him to spare her people. Hatak came back and conveyed to Esther Mordecai's remarks. Esther spoke with Hatak and instructed him to tell Mordecai all of his majesty's servants, as well as the peoples of all majesty's colonies, know that any man or woman who comes as close to the majesty as the innermost courtyard without an invitation suffers a single fate, execution, save for someone toward whom his majesty extends the golden scepter to permit him to live. And I have not been granted an invitation to visit his majesty these 30 days. They conveyed to Esther's remarks to Mordecai. Mordecai declared in reply to Esther, you had better not fantasize that in the royal palace you will escape the fate of all other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, release and liberation will materialize for the Jews from some other source, and you and your father's lineage will perish. Who knows whether at this time next year you will retain your position. Esther declared in reply to Mordecai, go, gather all the Jews found in Shushan and fast for my sake. Take neither food nor drink for 3 days, night and day. I and my maidservants will also fast this way. Having done this, I will come to the king, even though it is unlawful. And as I am bereft now, so must I be further bereft. Mordecai passed through the city and implemented all of Esther's instructions to him.
Yay! Next we have the JAGCOR reading. JAGCOR. So for him, I guess when he says King Ahasuerus, go, "Hoo!" Hoorah! Hoorah!
It was his third day. Esther closed herself in majestic appeal and stood in the innermost palace courtyard, facing the palace. The king sat at his imperial throne in the royal chamber, facing the entrance to the palace. And when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the courtyard, she gained his favorable regard, and the king extended towards Esther the golden scepter in his hand. Esther came closer and touched the point of the scepter. The king said to her, "What do you need, Queen Esther? What do you wish? Up till half my empire, and it shall be granted to you." Esther said, "If His Majesty deems it proper, that His Majesty and Haman attend today a feast which I have prepared for him." The king said, "Urge Haman to follow Esther's instructions." So the king and Haman arrived at the feast which Esther had prepared. The king said to Esther at the wine fest, "Whatever you request shall be granted to you. Whatever you wish up to half my empire shall be fulfilled." Esther replied, "My request and my wish. If I have gained His Majesty's favorable regard, and if His Majesty deems it proper to fulfill my request and gratify my wish, let His Majesty and Haman attend to the feast which I shall tender for them, and tomorrow I shall comply with His Majesty's command." Haman forth that day, joyful and content. But when Haman perceived Mordecai at the gateway to the king, neglecting to rise or bestir himself for him, Haman was totally incensed at Mordecai. Haman restrained himself, arrived at his home, and gathered his friends and his wife Zeresh. Haman boasted to them of the glories of his affluence and of the profusion of sons, and of all the eminence the king had given him, and he had exalted him above the ministers and the royal servants. And Haman said, "Even now, Queen Esther, let no man come with the king to the feast that she has prepared, but myself. Moreover, tomorrow also I have been invited by her to join the king. Still, all this is meaningless to me whenever I see Mordecai who's sitting at the gateway to the king." His wife Zeresh told him, and as so too all his friends, "Let them build a gallows 50 cubits high for the morning. Let them build a gallows 50 cubits high. In the morning, suggest to the king that they hang Mordecai, and then join the king at the feast joyfully." The scheme pleased Haman. He built the gallows.
It's funny because there's a lot of Gentiles here for the first time, and they're like, "These Jews do strange things on Purim." It's okay. That night, the king's sleep was disturbed, so he called for bringing the book of archives of historical events to be recited before the king. The king. It was discovered in the record that Mordecai had reported that Bigtan and Teresh, two of the king's stewards of the guardians of the entrance, had sought to assault King Ahasuerus. The king said, "What honor or eminence has been bestowed upon Mordecai?" For this, the king's youthful valets replied, "Not a thing has been done for him." "Who is in the courtyard?" said the king. Now Haman had just reached the outer courtyard of the palace to suggest to the king that Mordecai be hung from the gallows he had built for him. The king's youth said to him, "Haman is there standing in the courtyard." The king said, "Let him in." Haman entered. The king said to him, "What should be done for a man to whom the king wishes to honor?" Now Haman reflected. "Whom would the king desire to glorify more than me?" Haman said to the king. "A man whose glory the king desires. Let him bring the imperial robe worn by the king himself, and the horse be mounted by his majesty, the imperial crown to be placed on his head. Let the robe and the horse be handed to a distinguished minister, a nobleman. And then let them garb the man whose glory the king desires, mount him on the king's horse, and in the city thoroughfare, and proclaim before him, 'This is what is done with a man whose glory the king desires to show.'" The king said to Haman, "Quickly take the cloak and the horse just as you said, and go do so for Mordecai, the Jew, who sits at the gateway to the king. Do not omit anything you mentioned." Haman took the robe and the horse and garbed Mordecai. Then he led him on horseback throughout the city thoroughfare and proclaimed before him, "This is what is done with a man whose glory the king desires." Mordecai then returned to the gateway to the king, while Haman was rushed home grief-stricken, his head covered in mourning. Haman related to his wife Zeresh and all his friends all that had befallen him. His counselors and his wife Zeresh told him, "As Mordecai is of the Jewish stock, since you have begun to fall before him, you cannot overcome him, but you will surely fall before him." While they were still conversing with him, the king's stewards arrived, rushing to bring Haman to the feast which Esther had prepared. Chapter 7. With a little Southern Texas drawl, it's okay.
Wheel.
He got the horse.
The king and Haman came to drink with Queen Esther. The king said to Esther, "At the second day's wine fest as well, whatever you request, Queen Esther, shall be granted you. Whatever you wish, even until half the empire, it shall be fulfilled." Queen Esther replied, saying, "If I have gained your majesty's favor, and if his majesty deems it proper, let my life be granted me by my request, and my people by my wish. For we were sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, slaughtered, and annihilated. Now, had we been sold as slaves and maidservants, I would have remained silent, for the oppressor is not worthy of the trouble of his majesty." King Ahasuerus spoke. He said to Queen Esther, "Who is this? Who is the one that had the audacity to act this way?" Esther exclaimed, "An oppressive man, an enemy, this evil Haman." Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king rose in a fit of rage from the wine fest, toward the orchard garden, while Haman sought us to plead with Queen Esther for his life. For he realized that bad would befall him from the king. When the king returned from the orchard garden to the winefest room, Haman fallen on the couch upon which Esther reclined. The king exclaimed, "Even to overpower the queen with me in the palace." The words left the king's mouth, and Haman's face was enveloped in humiliation. Then Carbona, one of the king's personal stewards, declared, "Moreover, there is the gallows which Haman built for Mordecai, who spoke up in favor of the king, standing in Haman's house. 50 cubits high, the king commanded, hang him from it. They hung Haman from the gallows which he had prepared for Mordecai, and the king's anger dissipated. That day, King Ahasuerus awarded Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the oppressor of the Jews, and Mordecai appeared before the king. For Esther had told them how he was related to her. The king removed his ring, which he had reclaimed from Haman, and presented it to Mordecai. And Esther authorized Mordecai to take custody of Haman's estate. Esther spoke again before the king. She threw herself at his feet and wept, and pleaded with him to divert the evil decree of Haman, the Agagite, and his scheme which he had devised against the Jews. The king extended the golden scepter toward Esther. Esther rose and stood before the king. She said, "If his majesty deems it proper, and if I have gained favor before him, and the matter seems fitting before his majesty, and I am pleasing in his eyes, then let the writ be issued rescinding the documents conceived by Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, that he wrote ordering the annihilation of the Jews who reside in all the province of the king. For how can I possibly look on while catastrophe befalls my people? And how can I possibly look on while my heritage is annihilated?" King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther and to Mordecai, the Jew, "Here I have given Haman's estate, and he was hung from the gallows for attacking the Jews. Thus you may issue a writ concerning the Jews as you please, in the name of the king, and you may seal it with the king's ring. For a writ issued in the name of the king and sealed with the king's ring is not rescindable." The royal scribes were summoned at that time during the 3rd month, which is the month of Sivan, and on the 23rd of the month, and the transcripts were made of all the Mordecai's directives. To the Jews, to the envoys, to the governors, and to the ministers of the colonies which extended from India to Ethiopia, 127 colonies, each and every colony in its own script, each and every people in its own language, also to the Jews in their script and their language. He wrote in the name of King Ahasuerus, sealed it with the king's ring, and dispatched scrolls carried by couriers on horseback, riders of the royal breed, steeds bred of the royal stud. Namely, that the king authorized the Jews in each and every city to assemble and stand in defense of their lives, to destroy, slaughter, and annihilate the military forces of the people of colony oppressing them. Their children and women with their booty to be taken on a single day, in all the colonies of King Ahasuerus on the 13th of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. The terms of the writ would become legally binding in each and every colony, displayed conspicuously before the peoples, so that the Jews would be poised on that day to extract vengeance on their enemies. The couriers, riders of the royal breed, the steeds, rushed away by urgent royal command, and the decree was delivered in the capital city of Shushan. Mordecai emerged from the king's presence, attired in majestic garb of blue wool and pure white, with great golden crown, and the cloak of linen and purple wool. And the city of Shushan was blissfully joyful, for the Jews, their radiance, joy, delight, and glory in each and every colony, each and every city, every place whereto the king's directive and bylaw reached. There was joy and delight for the Jews, festivity and days of celebration, for with many among the people of the land converting to Judaism, as the fear of the Jews had descended over them.
That's right. We got y'all to join us. Because you didn't want to hear the noise. Now, I just need a reminder that Jews are little people for the most part, okay? Rick is an anomaly, right? The rest of us are pretty small. All right. During the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Oh my gosh, I should have let him keep going. There's a lot of bad names in here. On the 13th day of the month, when the king's directive and bylaw were to be put into effect, on the very day when the enemies of the Jews anticipated they could subdue them, it was totally reversed. For they, the Jews, subdued their enemies. The Jews assembled in their colonies throughout all of King Ahasuerus' colonies and assault those who sought their harm, and no man resisted them, for the fear had descended over all the people. Didn't matter we were short, the fear was there. All the colonies, ministers, envoys, and governors, and the imperial executive staff exalted the Jews as the fear of Mordecai had descended over them. For Mordecai was powerful in the royal palace, and his prestige extended throughout the colonies. For the distinguished Mordecai's greatness flourished. The Jews struck all their enemies with rapier blows, slaughtered and annihilation, doing as they pleased with their enemies. In the capital city of Szechuan, or Shushan, the Jews... Well, you know, they were hungry after the battle. They went and got some Chinese food. The Jews killed and annihilated 500 men, and Parshandatha and Dathlon and Aspada and Parada and Adalia and Aridata and Parmashta and Arise and Aride and Vezata, the 10 sons of Haman, son of Hammedatha, oppressor of the Jews. They were killed, but they did not lay their hands on the spoils. On that day, the total of those killed in the capital city of Shushan came to the king's attention. And the king said to Queen Esther, in the capital city of Shushan, the Jews killed and annihilated 500 men. And Haman's 10 sons. So in the remaining territories of the king, imagine what they have done. Now whatever you request shall be granted to you. Whatever else you wish shall be fulfilled. Esther replied, if His Majesty deems it proper, then let tomorrow too be granted to the Jews that are in Shushan to act in accordance with today's decree, and let the Haman's 10 sons be hung from the gallows. They've already been killed. Why they hung them, I never understood.
That's right.
I just picture the 10 of them hanging there, you know, like you'd take the ball and you'd swing one ball and it'd hit all the other balls and it would just go back. The decree was proclaimed in Shushan, and Haman's 10 sons were hung. The Jews who were in Shushan assembled also on the 14th day of the month of Adar and killed in Shushan 300 men, but they did not lay a hand on the spoils. Now the remaining Jews who were in the king's colonies assembled and stood in defense of their lives, bringing deliverance from their enemies, killing 75,000 of their antagonists. But they did not lay a hand on the spoils. That victory was on the 13th day of the month of Adar. And they rested on the 14th day of the month, making it a day of feasting and rejoicing. Whereas the Jews who were in Shushan assembled on the 13th and on the 14th of the month, and thus rested on the 15th day of the month, making it a day of feasting and rejoicing. For this reason, village Jews, those who reside in unwalled cities, observe the 14th day of the month of Adar as a day of feasting, rejoicing, and a day of celebration, sending gifts of food to one another. You know why we have so much food here now? Mordecai wrote of these matters and dispatched scrolls to all the Jews and all the king Ahasuerus' colonies, those nearby and those distant, mandating that they resolve to permanently observe the 14th day of the month of Adar and on the 15th day of the month, each and every year, corresponding to the days when the Jews realized deliverance from their enemies, and the month which had been transformed for them, from one of anguish to rejoicing, from grief to days of celebration, to observe them as days of fasting, of feasting and rejoicing, sending gifts of food to one another, and gifts to the poor. The Jews accepted as binding the observances they had begun, and those that Mordecai had mandated in his letter to them. For Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agite, oppressor of all the Jews, thought that he would annihilate the Jews. He cast a pur, meaning a lot, to terrorize them, then annihilate them. But when she came before the king, he directed in writing that the evil scheme which was intended for the Jews rebound against his own head. And they hung him and his sons from the gallows. For this reason, these days are entitled Purim, because of the poor. They are celebrated because of all that is narrated in this letter, and why they saw fit to act in such a way, and what had happened to them as a result. The Jews resolved and accepted as binding for themselves, their progeny, and anyone associated with them, never to be changed, that they would observe these 2 days as written at the proper time each year. These days shall be recalled and observed in every generation by every family, in every colony, in every city, and these Purim days shall never pass from among the Jews, nor their memory depart from their descendants. Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, wrote together with Mordecai, the Jew, and with all their authority, confirming this Purim letter a second time. Scrolls were dispatched to the Jews, to the 127 colonies of Ahasuerus, his kingdom, words of peace and truth. To maintain these Purim days at the proper time was the resolve and confirmed by Mordecai, the Jew, and Queen Esther, as they had resolved for themselves and their descendants, and the commemoration of the feast of their lamentations. Esther's ordinance regarding these Purim matters were perpetuated and inscribed in a scroll. King Ahasuerus levied a tax on the land dwellers and the ocean islanders, all of his mighty, powerful deeds, and the records of Mordecai, eminence that was granted him by the king, and all those are inscribed in the book of archives of the royalty of Media and Persia. For Mordecai, the Jew, was second to King Ahasuerus, great among the Jews and esteemed by most of his brethren. He sought the good of his people and was the spokesman for the welfare of all his descendants. Amen. Amen. So we have another Jew who got up there to providence, right? We had Joseph, came second in command of Egypt, and Mordecai in Persia. That was great. All right, Daniel, he was up there too, wasn't he? All right, we are going to have our talent show now. And I don't know who's up first. I gotta check this roll. The book of Esther, we just did that. All right, our time for our Purim. And the first one to be performing is Sue with an original song of her own that she wrote. Welcome, Sue! No grogging. No grogging the singers and performers.
Oh,
Go where you're comfortable.
Can you see it there?
Let's give her attention.
Okay. Making sure it's still in tune. I don't need to make sure it's still in tune. Yeah, I think we're right.
Is it all right?
Yeah, I think so. Let me know if it's a bit of I think it's all right. We'll go with that. So, we all have different talents and gifts and things, and this particular song, God will take a song and just drop it on me and say, here, take notes, because, write these chords down. And this one, I was actually driving. I was going up to Boston to pick up my son, so I'm on Interstate Highway, right, and this tune pops into my head. Not the words, just the tune. And I'm like, thanks, Lord. I can't take notes right now. What do you want me to do? Pull off? He's like, you got a voice recorder on the phone, right? So I figured it out. And then I didn't get the words until like 3 months later. Like, I don't know, it was different. Anyway, it's a blessing to be able to write things. It's also a blessing to be able to perform them for you guys. So this is called Worshiper. God has put this kind of together for me. So let me see. Where do I start? Worship
shepherd, God the Lord of all creation, wants to live with us in our hearts. Yes, the Lord of all creation wants to live with you
All right, we're going to have Alice next. Alice is going to sing in Spanish for us.
Do you have a translator?
There's about 1 million translators in here. Don't worry.
It's a song by Hillsong. In English, it's Oceans, but I'm going to be singing it in Spanish. Oh, I'm not nervous. Do I look nervous?
No, you're fine. I'm family.
Okay. Tu voz me llama a las aguas, donde mis pies pueden fallar, y ahí te encuentro en lo incierto. Caminaré sobre el mar, a tu nombre clamaré, en ti mis ojos fijaré, en tempestad descansaré en tu poder, pues tuyo soy hasta el final. Tu gracia abunda en la tormenta, tu mano, Dios, me guiará. Cuando hay temor en mi camino, tú eres fiel y no cambiarás, y a tu nombre clamaré, en ti mis ojos fijaré, en tempestad descansaré en tu poder, pues tuyo soy hasta el final. Tu espíritu me guía sin frontera, más allá de las paredes, a donde tú me llames. Tú me llevas más allá de lo soñado, donde puedo estar confiado al estar en tu presencia. Que tu espíritu me guíe sin fronteras, más allá de las paredes, a donde tú me llames. Tú me llevas más allá de lo soñado, donde puedo estar confiado al estar en tu presencia. Dios le bendiga.
That was spot on. I knew it.
I guess it's my turn now. I just Con que pagaremos amor tan inmenso. No, I'm not going to say that. What you may not have known about me, though, is I really wanted to be a news anchor when I was a kid, right? Because it's an easy job, right? I mean, all you get to be on TV, you make lots of money just by reading the news. And as long as you stay out of international news, I mean, it's easy. You don't have any weird names to pronounce. So let's look at today's news, okay? Montgomery County Council has outlawed urinating and defecating in public. They stated it was their number 1 and number 2 priorities. 12-year-old boy jokes, they still work. A new study came out today that said there's a high rate of suicide among dentists. Are there any dentists here? No? See? Dateline, Alabama. A cougar was killed at a local hotel in Alabama. Police are warning women over 50 to stay away from the hotel. Sorry, honey, I couldn't resist. Honda's come up with a new lawnmower that goes 150 miles an hour. It is very popular among gardeners who have been spotted by immigration agents. There's no political correctness here. Boise, Idaho. It recorded its hottest day on record at 106 degrees, beating out the old city record of 105 degrees back in 1875. Officials, of course, are blaming this new high on climate change, global warming. Back in 1875, they blamed it on summer. Port Charles, Florida. A woman reports lightning destroyed her septic tank, causing her toilet to explode. As a sign of poetic justice, it also hit the ceiling fan. Montgomery County Ambulance Services are now charging $400 a pop to pick up people who have fallen. This has prompted Life Alert to unveil their new slogan, "I've fallen and I can't afford to get up." A D.C. man was arrested for carrying cocaine in his Bible. He was charged and arrested for possession and leading others into temptation. Well, now you know why I didn't become a news anchor and I became a police detective. But you know, there was a wise rabbi one time who said that there's only two things that can destroy marriage: men and women. Now, it would really be nice if all women and men spoke the same language, but we don't speak the same language. And if you want a happy marriage, guys, you've got to learn how to speak woman. Now, I was married at a young age. I did not speak woman, okay? But there are certain things that when a woman makes a request of you, there's a word on the end that they don't say, but it's there. Trust me. So I'm sitting there, and my wife looks at me, and she goes, she's got the garbage in her hand. She goes, "Can you take out the trash?" I said, "Yes, of course, honey, I can." And she stands there. and she looks over at me doing that look. And I'm like, I'll get it. And then I get the hand on the hip. And then see, the word at the end of that sentence meant is now. I couldn't wait for halftime. I couldn't wait for a commercial. You have to take it out now. But I did learn that's a good thing, because now when we're driving on a long trip and my wife says, "Honey, I need a bathroom." I mean, we do it immediately. We don't want an accident in the car, right? We don't need all that. Okay. So, anyway, speaking of my wife, you know that English is not her first language, right? I mean, God bless her, but not knowing the right English way of saying things is not always helpful in this world. So, we're driving back from Mexico a few years back, and we had been down there at a resort, and our daughter had just bought a house in Houston, so we were looking for things to decorate our house that had like that southwestern motif, right? So we didn't really find anything in Mexico, but my wife found a nice little flower pot that had these little designs on it, so she went with that. Now, we get back to the U.S. border, and of course, we're stopped by Border Patrol. And the agent approaches the car, and he says, "Do you have anything to declare?" Now, I should mention that he came on my side of the car. He was speaking to me, but for whatever reason, my wife felt she had to answer. And my little helper in the car. So she says to the border agent, "We didn't really find anything that we wanted there, so we just bought a little pot." We are immediately removed from the car, and the car is searched. Now, when they didn't find any pot in the car, they took me to a private exam room where I had a physical exam, and nothing would come. My wife is no longer allowed to speak to border agents. And I told her, I said, "Honey, you really should get better at speaking English." I said, "You need to learn more words and what they mean and how." I said, "Have you thought about going through the thesaurus and increasing your English?" And she looks at me and she goes, "Where am I going to get a dinosaur and how's that going to help?" Now, where my wife is weak in speaking, I am weak in numbers, okay? I'm not numbers. As a kid, math was not my subject, and it didn't help that my dad was a physicist, so he could have this enormous blackboard full of letters, numbers, and equations and weird, funny-looking symbols. And he could figure it out in his head without any help. Now, when I started junior high school, they started replacing numbers in math class with letters. Yeah. I'm not making it up. They really did that. And then they said it was no longer addition, subtraction, multiplication. No, they want you to find X. Yeah. And I said, did you try the alphabet? It's kind of close near the end by Y. My teacher didn't think that was funny. But word problems were the worst. So my dad tries to help me with my math. Okay, and you know the questions they give you? Okay, it's Saturday, March 24th, and Mary has to buy 16 cans of beans, but she can only carry 4 cans of beans at a time, and they cost 55 cents. How many trips does Mary have to make to the store? I've got this, right? I put my chart together. It's March 23rd. What the heck are you using that for? You don't need to know it's March 23rd. I said, well, we don't need the information. Why'd they put it in there? To throw you off. I said, well, it worked. It worked really well, right? But every math session with my dad would end up with him screaming and me crying. And I mean, literally, him screaming, me crying. And I didn't want him to have another heart attack. So I've gotten better at figuring out numbers. You know, I use Google. I use Google. But I still don't fully understand numbers. I had a lot of trouble with statistics in college. Anyone else have to take statistics in college? That was horrible. But here's an example. This is why statistics doesn't make sense to me. There are 2 billion Chinese people in the world, right? So statistically, 1 out of every 5 births is going to be a Chinese person. There's 5 kids in my family. I was so excited when my mother was going to have the 5th kid. I wanted a Chinese brother. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. He came out another Jew. How disappointing was that, right? And what about the fact that 44% of all marriages end in divorce? That's kind of shaky, right? I mean, 44%, until you think of it the other way around. You know that 56% of all marriages end in death? Yeah. That's how marriages end, death or divorce. I don't know. So what about this? 65% of Americans are overweight for their height. But another way of looking at it is 65% of Americans are not tall enough for their weight. So I'm not 35 pounds overweight, I'm 12 inches too short. What we need to do is we need to start a group called Height Watchers. Now, I was also reading that 1 in 3 women, 33% of women, marry a man because they thought he was funny. Now, this is great. You never ever hear a guy go, huh, she's not pretty, but man, is she funny. I had to marry her, right? But then I realized that 1 out of 3 women marry a man because he's funny, not good looking. So that means there's a 1 in 3 chance my wife married me because I'm funny and not good looking. There's a chance my wife thinks I'm ugly. So I go up to her, I said, honey, do you think I'm good looking? And she starts laughing and she says, oh my God, you are so funny. I'm like, what? I mean, I know that my wife wanted to marry somebody tall, dark, and handsome, and she settled for someone short, round, and red.
Funny.
And funny. But at least she thinks go with your strengths. Yeah. Actually, I'm surprised that Herta married me at all. I mean, you know that she's not just extremely beautiful, but she's also talented and gifted and smart. I mean, one person always has to marry down, and we know who married down in our relationship. But I wanted to impress her. But there was so much I didn't understand, especially about money, okay? One time she let me pay the bills, and I came out of the den after I paid all the bills, and I said, honey, we don't owe anybody anything. And she looked at me, what are we going to live on now? We had no money for food or anything else. But we hadn't been together very long when I graduated from high school. I know that sounds really weird. But yes, I was in high school. And I graduated, and my Italian grandmother sent me a cash gift. Now, I knew that my mom's family was very wealthy. Each of her sisters decided to marry for money after the war. Now, I was really excited to get this cash gift from my grandmother. Herta was working, I was in high school, so I wasn't contributing much to the marriage, and certainly not contributing financially at the time. And then my grandmother, bless her heart, she sent me, are you ready? 20,000 lire. 20,000. I was so happy. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to surprise her with 20,000 lira. We can finally get out of this crap apartment, maybe even buy a car. So I go to the bank with my 20,000 lira, and I give it to the teller, and she gives me back $18. Like, what the heck? And I'm giving her that look like, you stealing from me? Where's the rest of my money? And the teller, she says, well, there's an exchange fee. I give you 20,000, you give me 18, and you're telling me there's an exchange fee of how much? And then I tell her, I said, you may not realize this, but this was a gift from my grandmother for graduating from high school. And she goes, oh, sweetie, let me give you back the exchange fee. And she pulls out $2. I gave her 20,000 of something. She gave me $20. I was so angry. She's trying to rip me off, right? I mean, what does she think I am? Because right now, I am not funny. But she says, congratulations on your graduation. Now, I didn't know what to do, because I really thought she ripped me off. And I had no idea about exchange rates. I gave her 20,000 lira. I felt violated. I really did. Anyway, how could 20,000 of anybody else's money only be $20 in U.S., right? So I go home and I tell her what happened at the bank. You know what she did? She laughed. She goes, you are so funny. This is what happens when you spend your summers in the Catskills. Arnold!
Now that's a hard act to follow right there.
Yeah. You got the devil, right?
Okay, if I were the devil, now I didn't write this, I'm not going to take credit for it, but here we go. If I were the prince of darkness, I would want to engulf the whole world in darkness. And I'd have 1/3 of its real estate and 4/5 of its population, but I wouldn't be happy until I'd seized the ripest apple on the tree. All of you. So I would set about, however necessary, to take over the United States. I'd subvert the churches first. I begin a campaign of whispers. With the wisdom of a serpent, I would whisper to you as I whispered to Eve, do as you please. To the young, I would whisper that the Bible is a myth. I would convince them that man created God instead of the other way around. I would confide that what's bad is good and what's good is square. And the old I would teach to pray after me, our Father who art in Washington. And then I'd get organized. I would educate authors on how to make lurid literature exciting so that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. I would threaten TV with dirtier movies and vice versa. I'd peddle narcotics to whom I could. I would sell alcohol to ladies and gentlemen of distinction. I would tranquilize the rest with pills. If I were the devil, I'd soon have families at war with themselves, churches at war with themselves, and nations at war with themselves until each in its turn was consumed. If I were the devil, I would encourage schools to refine young intellects, but neglect to discipline emotions. Just let those run wild.
Yeah.
Until before you knew it, you'd have drug-sniffing dogs and metal detectors at every schoolhouse door. Within a decade, I'd have prisons overflowing. I'd have judges promoting pornography. Soon, I could evict God from the courthouse, then from the schoolhouse, and then from the houses of Congress. And in his own churches, I would substitute psychology for religion and deify science. I would lure priests and pastors into misusing boys and girls and church money. If I were the devil, I would make the symbol of Easter an egg, and the symbol of Christmas a bottle. If I were the devil, I would take from those who have and give to those who wanted until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious. And what'll you bet? I could get whole states to promote gambling as a way to get rich. I would caution against extremes in hard work, patriotism, and moral conduct. I would convince the young that marriage was old-fashioned, that swinging is more fun, that what you see on TV is the way to be. And thus I'd address you in public, and I could lure you into bed with diseases for which there is no cure. In other words, if I were the devil, I would just keep right on doing what he's doing.
Alice, Amy, and Leslie.
So we are going to sing for you, and it comes from Psalm 14, which I will read first. Psalm 14. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt. They do abominable deeds. There is none who does good. The Lord looks down from heaven on the children of man to see if there are any who understand, who seek after God. They've all turned aside. Together they have become corrupt. There is none who does good, not even one. Have they no knowledge, all the evildoers who eat up my people as they eat bread and do not call upon the Lord? There they are in great terror, for God is with the generation of the righteous. You would shame the plans of the poor, but the Lord is his refuge. Oh, that salvation for Israel would come out of Zion. When the Lord restores the fortunes of his people, let Jacob rejoice and let Israel be glad. Do you want to go to the mic? No, here. All of us. Okay, ready? 1, 2, ready, go.
Oh, that salvation for Israel would come out of Zion. Oh, that salvation for Israel would come out of Zion. When the Lord restores the captives of his people, let Jacob rejoice. When the Lord returns the captives from the nations, let Israel be glad. Oh, that salvation for Israel will come out of Zion. Oh, that salvation for Israel would come out of Zion. When the Lord restores the captives of his people, let Jacob rejoice. When the Lord returns the captives from the nations, let Israel be glad. When the Lord restores the captives of his people, let Jacob rejoice. When the Lord restores the Israel will come out of Zion, let Israel rejoice. Oh, that salvation for Israel would come out of Zion. Oh, that salvation for Israel would come out of Zion.
We interrupt this Purim for the truth. There's been a situation happening, and I have the guy who was there as a witness. He's about to tell you the story.
I have a book, and it's, thank you. Thank you. My crew, my roadies. Thank you. This book was written by the wolf. This is his story. Okay? And it's a true story. And I'll explain it. Everybody knows the story of the three pigs, or at least they think they do. But I'll let you in on one little secret. Nobody knows the real story because no one has ever heard my side of the story, the wolf side. I'm the wolf, Alexander T. Wolf. You can call me Al. I don't know how the whole big bad wolf thing got started, but it's all wrong. Maybe it's because of our diet. Hey, it's not my fault. Wolves eat cute little animals like bunnies, sheep, and pigs. That's just the way we are. If cheeseburgers were cute, folks would probably think you were big and bad too. But like I was saying, the whole big bad wolf thing is all wrong. The real story is about a sneeze and a cup of sugar. This is the real story. Way back in Once Upon a Time, I was making a birthday cake for my dear old granny. I had a terrible sneezing cold and I ran out of sugar. So I walked down the street to ask my neighbor for a cup of sugar. Now, the neighbor was a pig. And he wasn't too bright either. He had built his whole house out of straw. Can you believe it? I mean, who in his right mind would build a house of straw? So, of course, the minute I knocked on the door, it fell right in. I didn't want to just walk into someone else's house, so I called Little Pig, are you in? No answer. I was just about to go home without the cup of sugar for my dear old granny's birthday cake. That's when my nose started to itch. I felt a sneeze coming on. Well, I huffed and I snuffed and I sneezed a great sneeze. And you know what? The whole darn straw house fell down. And right in the middle of the pile of straw was the first little pig, dead as a doornail. He had been home the whole time. It's like a shame to leave a perfectly good ham dinner there in the straw. So I ate it up, thinking of it as a big cheeseburger just laying there. I was feeling a little better, but I still didn't have my cup of sugar, so I went to the next neighbor's house. This neighbor was the first pig's brother. He was a little smarter, but not much. He had built his house of sticks. I rang the bell on the stick house. Nobody answered. I called Mr. Pig, are you in? He yelled back, go away, Wolf. You can't come in. I'm shaving. The hair's on my chinny chin. I had just grabbed the doorknob when I felt another sneeze coming on. I huffed and I snuffed and I tried to cover my mouth, but I sneezed a great sneeze. And you're not going to believe it, but this guy's house fell down just like his brother's. When the dust cleared, there was a second little pig, dead as a doornail. Wolf's honor. Now you know food will spoil if you just leave it out in the open, so I did the only thing that there was to do. I had dinner again. I think of it as a second helping. I was getting awfully full, but my cold was feeling a little better, and I still didn't have that cup of sugar for my dear old granny's birthday. So I went to the next house. This guy was the first and second pig's brother. He must have been the brains of the family. He had built his house of bricks, and knocked on the brick house, no answer. I called Mr. Pig, are you in? And do you know what that rude little porker answered? Get out of here, Wolf. Don't bother me again. Talk about impolite. He probably had a whole sack full of sugar. And he wouldn't give me even one little cup for my dear, sweet old granny's birthday cake. What a pig. I was just about to go home and maybe make a nice birthday card instead of a cake when I felt my cold coming on. I huffed and I snuffed and I sneezed once again. Then the third little pig yelled, "And your old granny can sit on a pin." Now, I'm usually a pretty calm fellow, but when somebody talks about my granny like that, I go a little crazy. When the cops drove up, of course, I was trying to break down the pig's door, and the whole time I was huffing and puffing and sneezing and making a real scene. The news reporters found out about the 2 pigs I had for dinner. They figured a sick guy going to borrow a cup of sugar didn't sound very exciting, so they jazzed up the story with all that huff and puff and blow your house down, and they made me the big bad wolf. That's it, the real story. I was framed. And the last picture is him holding out a cup for some sugar. That one.
Published in Montgomery County.
I wrote these in 2000, around 2000, 2001. I was rededicating my life back to God, and this is what I got from the Holy Spirit. The first one is called "Since I Let Him In." Since I let Him in, some new things happened. I learned to face myself, not just look, but face myself in the mirror of life. Since I let Him in, I've learned to forgive myself, relive, relax, relate, release. You laugh because you don't understand my peace. Since I let Him in, the walls that kept me have fallen. The stares from others, oh, they're still there. I've just learned with Him not to care. Yes, since I let Him in, the old way and old things began to fade, and I found that I was fearfully and wonderfully made. Since I let Him in, my loads aren't mine to bear. The burdens don't seem to overthrow me. And thank God, my mind's not blown. Since I let Him in, I always have an ear to hear me, a love that keeps me. I don't stay up and cry all night because Jesus said if I joined with Him, His yoke is easy. His burdens are light. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He anoints my head with oil and prepares a table before me in the presence of my enemy. My cup runs over and over and over. And as I walk, since I let Him in, He has my back. He's truly a friend. This didn't cost me nothing. I got this for free. Unlike people, He required nothing from me. Obedience. You see, He came to set the captives free. Yes, Jesus died for you and me. So if you have things that bother you, no matter what you like, He's no respecter of persons. Take hold of Jesus and let Him in, and see what for you a new life begin. If you let Him in.
Yeah.
And finally, it's called Take Your Prayers Upstairs. We need to go upstairs to pray. Renew your minds, release our will. Stop thinking in that same old way. Take ourselves upstairs to pray. We need to go upstairs to pray. Go further than we usually do. The benefits are personal, but it helps others too. We need to go upstairs to pray, to find, to seek, to heal, for strength, for broken, torn, and messed up souls, for thieves, for lost, for peace to hold. We need to go upstairs to pray. Take new levels in God's grace. Seek Him in a higher place. We need to go upstairs to pray. You think this is about a pair of stairs, a place to find a point in time? It's all about the mercy seat. It's all about the depth in God. How sweet. It's all about the place we see God in. Do we trust Him? Can He handle things? Or do we repent over and over again? This isn't set to show our faults or to make anyone feel bad. It's just to show that it would be easier if you took your prayers to the Godhead. Elevate your spiritual minds and leave those old hellish thoughts behind. Take a step above to get deeper in God's love. Remove your shoes and jump in with both feet. Go upstairs to God's mercy seat. Don't let your dreams and visions go away. Take them to the master planner. Take them to the understander. Take them to the counselor. Take them to His majesty. Take your prayers upstairs so you can be free.
I'll let you figure out which one is Satan.
Give us 2 minutes, 1 minute to set up.
Are you going to need your clicker?
Yeah.
I just got it on the first one.
How does it work?
Just hit the next. Yep, just hit the next one to the right.
2 seats, two chairs.
Same as on Tuesday night. Which one is Satan?
The brothers.
Whenever you're ready, Wes.
Okay.
Where's the band?
Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da da da.
Oh,
Wes, your line. Hello.
oh, okay. Hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the West Highland Show. Today we have a very unique guest. He claims to be Lucifer. That's right, the old devil himself. So let's welcome and give a big round of applause to our first guest, Lucifer the Devil. I might say you will certainly be the most interesting guest I think I may have ever had on the show. I thought that you would have shown up in a red suit with a pitchfork in one hand and a long pointed tail.
Well, thank you. I actually prefer people to think of me as a cute cartoon character. It provides good cover. Keeps their guard down about me, you know?
So tell me a bit about yourself. What have you been up to lately?
Well, I've been roaming to and fro about the earth, observing people, giving people good counsel to those who follow the desires of their own heart.
Interesting. So you work alone?
Well, really think of me as a president or CEO of a very large corporation. You can see back there.
Wow. How many people do you have work for you, or might I add, non-people work?
Millions upon millions. And the number of employees grows by the hundreds of thousands every day.
How do you recruit and retain such a large number of employees?
Well, you know, I have some on staff that have no choice. They decided long ago to pledge their allegiance to me. Others, I recruit by easy means.
Easy means?
Yeah, I give them what their hearts desire. The heart which desires the riches, the fame, the glory, acceptance of this world as my Lord. But it's just not that. As long as people want to do their own will, they belong to me. People come to work for me because I tell them they can be like gods, dependent on themselves, fulfillment in the material careers, the desires of the hearts.
Sounds like you have willing employees.
I do. And you know what? My favorite employees are those who think they work for the competition, but they are so deceived they don't even know they're actually assisting me in my work.
Heavy statement. Please unpack what you mean by that. Who's your competitor? have willing employees.
He calls himself God, but we know there are many gods. Krishna, Buddha, Allah, Brahma, evolution, they all work for me.
Evolution, how is evolution God?
Well, it's an idea. One of my directors suggested a long time ago to recruit the young. And Noah has it worked marvelously. Pastors at most churches believe in it, congregants, and the majority of people on earth. It has been one of my best recruitment tactics. So how is it a God? Well, people put their faith in the theory, and they worship the idea. The creator has been put out of business with evolution. And if they believe evolution is true, then anything is permissible to them.
Any other recruitment tactics? That all sounds a bit far-fetched.
I do. I use Hollywood, music. You know, at one time I used to be the choir director for a very large band. Television, public schools, university, talk shows like this, social media, drugs, alcohol, but then encouraging people again to follow the desires of their own heart has probably been one of my most effective tactics.
Okay, let's change subjects now. What exactly does your corporation do? What assets, business dealings?
Assets? Well, the whole world is mine. I'm the prince of the air. Billions pledge allegiance to me, and the best part is they don't have no clue that they are. I am that good.
I know some of the audience members may have some questions for you. Let's see. You, sir, what question do you have?
I have a question. I read the Bible. In the end, it says that you lost.
Cut.
But the Bible says that you lost, and it says that God wins. All right, we have Rick now. Rick has a new song. Might take him a minute to set up since we destroyed everything he was using. Just sing low, Rick.
Sweet chariot.
I lowered the music stand. I lowered the microphone.
One of the joys of being a worship leader. You know, you might have noticed I'm not what I technically would call a musician. I love music. But for me, it is all about worship. Once in a while, I go back to the 70s and do some of those Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young stuff, but it's not common for me. And so one of the joys of being a worship leader is to run across a new song and for it to be immersed in my own life, my head and my heart. Because I usually won't bring a song to God's people until it is real for me. So, you might have heard of this guy, Phil Wickham. This is not something I wrote. This Phil Wickham wrote this, and he's one of my favorites. So I've been working on this, and I was telling Beauty earlier that I'm working it in two ways. One is kind of a meditative song. That's what I'm going to play tonight. But it can also be a rocker. So when we put it together for the band, we'll probably focus in on that.
He who died rose again.
join the resurrection, stand beside the heroes of the faith, and with one voice, 1,000 generations will sing, worthy is the Lamb who was slain, and forever he shall reign. So let it be today, we shout the hymn of heaven, with angels and the saints, we raise a mighty roar, glory to our God, who gave us life beyond the grave. We'll sing, holy, holy is the Lord. Yes, holy, holy is the Lord. We'll all sing, holy, holy is the Lord.
Alright guys, we're going to end tonight with we're just going to go ahead and do Ani Mami. We're going to skip over Havdalah because it's already late. We got popcorn to make and the movie to watch. So we're just going to do our congregational song. Let's sing together.
Give me a second.
Wait. Wait for Rick. Wait for Rick.
It's here somewhere.
It's there somewhere.
You know, I was obviously raised Jewish, Long Island, New York. As from an ethnic standpoint, didn't get any more Jewish than I was. From a religious standpoint, different issue. But I had never heard this till, I joined this congregation.
Wow.
I love it.
We're going to do the benediction. I know. So, did you guys enjoy Purim tonight?
Yeah!
I'm glad you guys were here. I'm glad you came, and I'm glad we got to boo Haman! Good. All right, let's stand for the benediction, and then we'll make popcorn, and we'll start the movie. God told Moses to tell Aaron, here's how you bless the children. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you. The Lord lift up his countenance on you and be gracious unto you. And the Lord give you shalom. Bechumecha. Yisa Adonai, Parav Alecha, Ve'asim Lecha Shalom. B'Shem Yeshua, Sar Shalom, Leka Shalom, Amen. Stick around for the movie, get some food, get some dessert, and we'll see you Facebook next time. Thanks for being with us.